Hi guys, this lesson will be on 8-4 factoring trinomials. So our first example will be 7x to the second plus 29x plus 4. In section 8-3, we factored a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1. So this is our leading term, and now we have a leading coefficient of 7. We used to be able to just break the x squared up into x and x, but now we have a 7x squared, so we do have to look at the factors of 7x squared. 7x squared can only be broken up into 7x and x. Remember that sometimes there are more factors than just 2. So 7, the only factors of 7 are 7 and 1. But if we had a 6x squared there, we'd have to break up the factors into either 2x times 3x or 6x times 1x. So we could be dealing with several different options. Now, this problem differs a little bit from the last type of problems because of the 7x. Normally, we're just able to look at the 4, our end term right here, and look at the factors of 4 that add up to our middle. But because of this 7x squared, this leading coefficient of 7, we actually have to multiply 7 times 4 this time. So 7 times 4 is 28, and now we're looking at the factors of 28 that add to our middle term of 29. So we'll make a list as usual. 28 is 1 times 28. This adds to 29. This is the option that we're looking for. Basically, these two terms were our middle terms. So if we break our 29 up into our middle terms, we'd have 28x plus 1x. And we had our 7x squared and our plus 4. What we would be able to do now that we've broken this up, our middle term, into 2 terms, now we have 4 terms, and we'd be able to do factoring by grouping. In our factoring by grouping, out of our first 2 terms, we would be pulling out a 7x, and we would be left with, I'll do this at the bottom in another color so that you guys can see this better. Let's do it in yellow. We would be taking out that 7x, and we would be left with x plus 4. Out of our second parentheses, we would be pulling out a positive 1, and we would be left with x plus 4. And remember that our answer would be the first 2 terms put back together, the 7x and the plus 1. Well, we already put the 7x there. So we would have 7x plus 1. And in our second parentheses, we would have our common term of x plus 4. And this would be our answer. As always, we should do out the distributive property to check our answers. So again, I'll do this in red off to the side. 7x times x is 7x squared. 7x times 4 gives us the 28x. 1 times x gives us the 1x. And 1 times 4 gives us the plus 4. And that's going to run off the whiteboard, so bear with me, okay? And then when we combine our middle terms right here, we would get 7x squared plus 29x plus 4. So we know that we factored this correctly because we found the product and we've checked our work. In our next example, we'll be factoring 3x squared plus 24x plus 45. As always, when factoring any term, any expression, we should look for a GCF first. So 3, 24, and 45 are all divisible by 3. So what we should do first is we should factor out our GCF of 3. If we take out a 3, we'd be left with x squared plus 8x plus 15. And now we're left with a trinomial in our parentheses that as well can be factored. 8x squared plus 8x plus 15. Now there is no leading coefficient on the x squared, so we would do 1 times 15, which is just going to give us 15, and our answer will look like this: 3 times a binomial times another binomial. We should be looking at the factors of 15 that add to 8. So our factors of 15 are 1 times 15, 3 times 5. The factors of 15 that add to a positive 8 would be 3 and 5. So our trinomial is x plus 3 and x plus 5. And as always, we should check our work. So x times x gives us x squared, x times 5 gives us 5x, x times 3 gives us 3x, and x times 3 times 5 gives us 15. When we combine our middle terms, we would get 8x. And if we multiply our GCF of 3 to our trinomial, we would get 3x squared plus 24x plus 45. This tells us that we factored our original trinomial correctly, and this is our answer. In example 2, we'll be trying to factor the trinomial 2x squared plus 5x minus 2. Now, as always, we should look for a GCF. 2, 5, and 2 are not divisible by any common number, so there is no GCF. So then we would multiply our first term times our last term. 2 times negative 2 is a negative 4. We're looking at the factors of 4 that subtract to 5. Well, our factors of 4 are 4 times 1 or 2 times 2. We'd be subtracting to get a positive 5. Well, 4 minus 1 gives us 3. 2 minus 2 gives us 0. So there are no factors of 4 that subtract to 5, which tells us that this trinomial is prime. In our last example, we'll be solving the equation 8x squared plus 9x minus 5 equals 4 minus 3a. Because we have an a squared, we know that this will be a quadratic equation and that we need to factor this equation. We need to solve this equation by factoring. So our first step in solving by factoring is to move all of our terms to one side. So we'll be subtracting 4. We'll move that 4 over with the negative 5. We'll also be adding this 3a to both sides so that we move this to the left side with our negative 9a. Our new equation is 8a squared minus 6a minus 9 equals 0. Now that everything is on one side, we can try to factor our equation in order to solve. So the first thing that we should do is look for a GCF. 8, 6, and 9 are not divisible by any common GCF, so we don't have one. So then we'll be looking at factoring a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 8. The first thing that we need to do is multiply our first term times our last term. So 9 times 8 is 72, and we'll be looking at the factors of 72 that subtract to negative 6. Our factors of 72. So let's first look at 72. We get that from multiplying 8 times 9. 8 is 4 times 2, and 9 is 3 times 3. So we have 1 times 72, 2 times 9, it would be 2, and then we'd be doing 3 times 3, which is 9, 9 times 4, which is 36. Remember, each time we'll be subtracting in order to find the factors that subtract to give us a negative 6. So that doesn't work, and neither does this. Our next factor would be 3. So we take 1 3 out, and we would have 4 times 6. 4 times 6 is 24. 24 minus 3 doesn't give us 6. Our next factor would be 4. So we'd be taking the 4 out, and we would be left with 9 times 2, which is 18. 18 minus 4 doesn't give us 6. Our next factor would be 5. None of our factors are divisible by 5. Our next factor would be 6. So we'll be taking one of the 3's and the 2 out to give us 6. And we'll be putting the other 3 and the 4 together to give us 12. 12 minus 6 does give us 6. We need a negative 6 though. So 12 minus 6 gives us a positive 6. 6 minus 12 gives us a negative 6. So this is the option. These are the factors that subtract to give us negative 6. We can use factoring by grouping, or we can try to use our quicker method. Let's use factoring by grouping. We have 8a squared. We have a positive 6a. We have a negative 12a and a negative 9. In factoring by grouping, we'll be grouping our first terms and our last terms together. Our first terms have a GCF of 2a, and we'll be left with 4a plus 3. Negative 12 and negative 9 have a GCF of 3, and because our 12 is negative, we'll have to take out a negative 3. And we'll be left with 4a plus 3. Make sure that you check your work on this. Negative 3 times 4a gives us negative 12a. Negative 3 times positive 3 does give us negative 9. So our equation factored would be 2a minus 3 times 4a plus 3 equals 0. And now we need to solve both of our two-step equations for our answer. In our first two-step equation, we have 2a minus 3 equals 0. We'll be adding 3 to both sides to get 2a equals 3. Then we'll be dividing by 2 on both sides. So our answer will be 3 over 2. In our second equation, we have 4a plus 3 equals 0. We'll be subtracting 3 on both sides. Then we'll be dividing both sides by 4. So our answer will be a negative 3 over a positive 4. So our two answers in solving this quadratic equation is a positive 3 over 2 and a negative 3 over 4.